Now I'm going to go to Elizabeth Millner. Elizabeth, thanks so much for coming on. You were in that courtroom for this proceeding. First thing I was hoping you could clarify, what exactly happened with the protective order? The big conversation was whether or not Brian Friedman, or let alone any other attorneys, how much they can litigate this case in the public, what out-of-court statements can they make, what can't they say. Still trying to get clarification about that. A lot of our commenters online are wondering about that. And also, you were there. I don't think you saw Ryan Reynolds or Blake Lively, but what did you see and what did you hear?
Yeah, no, unfortunately for our viewers, there was no Justin Baldoni, there was no Blake Lively, there was no Ryan Reynolds or any other family members, as far as I could tell from being inside that courtroom. As far as that clarification on whether or not a gag order will be inflicted, no, not necessarily. So what's going to happen now is that the judge was actually pretty reluctant, to kind of issue a Rule 3.6. And from your clarification, Jesse, during that commercial break, that was more so just about ethics, about, Brian Friedman making those statements to the media, trying to, as Blake Lively's attorneys would explain it, trying to potentially taint the jury pool by making these out of comments. But it was kind of interesting in the sense that it was a lot of back and forth inside that courtroom. So, as far as every statement that was made by Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' attorney, it was always countered by Justin Baldoni's attorneys. Well, they started it first. They began this first. Had this not happened, this wouldn't be an issue right now. So I think on their side, them being the Baldoni team, they're just kind of playing defense, right? Like, all of this started back in August, as far as we can tell. Honestly, all of it started back on that set of It Ends With Us. But, it's a bunch of he said, she said, but the judge kind of wanted to stop the he said, she said. And as far as kind of making these statements out to the media, again, that that Rule 3.6 will go into effect. So that way, as far as ethics goes, and this was something actually Baldoni's team wanted. They encouraged it. They came out here during that press conference and were actually pleased by the way that the hearing went. And so I think that a lot of things as far as going forward now might be a lot lesser than it was before. But look, that website is still up and running. I actually saw the website on Friday when it had first launched, and I think that was also a big issue from Blake Lively's team, is that they were okay with the website going up as far as the amended complaint goes. Now, when it came to that timeline, they actually wanted that timeline to be incorporated with the complaint as far as going into that paragraph form, because they kind of explained that this was all their side of the story. This was one-sided. But, when you have receipts, proofs, timeline, facts, text messages, all this stuff to kind of counter the claims that, your client has put forth, it's kind of hard to kind of diminish that a little bit as far as, what is the possible jury pool going to see, before they're getting called for this case. And that, of course, we know that the trial is going to be slated for next year. They're going to keep that date of next year, even though the judge kind of mentioned a little bit that he might be interested in pushing that date forward, because it seems like everyone across the board just wants a resolve. Everyone across the board is claiming, with their respective parties, that they have been either emotionally or financially damaged by everything that's going on, whether it's Blake and Ryan Reynolds, who, again, we have to stress, Ryan Reynolds was not even a part of the It Ends With Us movie. Again, there's a lot of conspiracies, kind of what role he plays a little bit right now, but just sticking to the facts here. Whereas, Baldoni's team, they're being accused of sexual harassment, all this types of things. So it's a lot of he said, she said. It's a lot of kind of mess. It's kind of giving you a little eeriness of what had happened with the Johnny Depp Amber Heard situation. But again, this isn't a criminal case. This is not a criminal matter. No one's going to jail. This is a civil matter. So I think as far as the resolve goes, could we all argue that there's been damage to every single party involved? Absolutely. But it'll be up to a jury to decide how much damage and who goes to what. But as far as going inside the courtroom, again, this is a civil matter. And so what was called today was Lively versus Wayfarer Studios. And so what would happen when you go inside that courtroom, very similar to, when I've been to those Diddy hearings, is that, because it was the Lively complaint, so, or the Lively matter, I should say, the Lively team was sitting up front, kind of where the state or the government would sit as far as if it was a criminal matter. The defense was sitting right behind them. And then all scattered throughout the court room, especially, was just a bunch of media. There's a lot of public interest in this case. I open up TikTok every single day, and it's new updates every single day about what is going on with Blake and Justin. And then I think this amended complaint that's been added to the website, one big thing that came out of this hearing as well, too, was just the fact that the New York Times was added to this list. And so with the New York Times being added, Justin Baldoni's attorneys kind of signaled that they might try to motion for a dismissal in the matter that's involved in California, mainly so that way everything can be all in one here in New York, which might save up some time. So that way, all parties aren't going from New York to California, California to New York, all kind of talking about the same matter here. But, if you go onto that website, if you print out the documents, and I did print out what I could without Joanne, our office manager, kind of yelling at me about using up nearly 300 pages of printer paper in the office. What I did was I ended up printing out about 50 pages from the amended complaint, but I printed out the entire New York Times complaint as well too, or the lawsuit I should say. And it's just a lot of paper, it's a lot of documents, it's a lot of evidence that Baldoni's team is adamant that this will prove that their client never sexually harassed or defamed or, spoke lowly of Blake Lively or Ryan Reynolds or any of that sort. So a lot of this matter here today will kind of, more will come along. So essentially what's going to be happening next is a lot of discovery. So the discovery between the agents and what they may have said to Baldoni, or the discovery between Blake and Ryan, even a potential deposition to Blake Lively could be happening very soon. And again, all parties were kind of stressing that they want things to kind of happen at a very quick turnaround. They want things to be done and over with. Brian Friedman earlier was saying that his client has suffered financially and emotionally with Wayfarer Studios. Mike Gottlieb on the other side says that Blake Lively has also suffered the same. And then, kind of adding on the alleged smear campaigns from both sides, a huge factor that was also mentioned was the metadata. The metadata is important because, a lot of people, we will call them armchair detectives here at Law&Crime, but, some people, and according to this complaint, call them online sleuths who, pointed out like, hey, the New York Times was allegedly well aware of this complaint going to be filed. And honestly, even just from a PR perspective, and we know here at Law&Crime that, it takes time to get statements from everybody. It takes time to come up with these graphics. It takes time for everyone to kind of get their ducks in order for them to publish a big story like this. So the big question is, when did they know it and how did they know it? Who gave them this information? How did everything start rolling from them? And that metadata kind of alluding to the fact that they knew as early as October. Now, we all know that the story wasn't published until December. And again, I'm talking about the New York Times article that kind of really just set everything in motion as far as what's going to be happening inside a court of law. Before, it was just kind of, bad publicity, the ends with us, press tour and all of that sort, but then they took it to the courts. It ends in the courts, that type of thing. And so it'll be interesting to see, one, how the New York Times responds, because they are very adamant and very strong that they are standing by their reporting in the matter. But as far as we know right now, they haven't been subpoenaed yet. That might have changed in the matter of since I've been in that hearing, because again, it's a federal court case, so I am not allowed to have my phone. I'm not allowed to have my Apple Watch in there. I'm stuck with a pen and paper just to kind of so that way no electronic devices are entered into that courtroom. So as far as kind of what happens next, Jesse, is that the discovery will be exchanged. They kind of want the discovery, at least the timeline of it, to start kind of unfolding by next week, by Valentine's Day, and then they're supposed to have all their ducks in a row by March, and then we'll kind of see where the case kind of unfolds from there.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, the judge basically warned Brian Friedman, basically like, do not litigate this in the court of public opinion. The big thing is there is a rule, you mentioned it, you can't make out-of-court statements that might materially prejudice this case. And not saying that's what he was doing, but you don't want to get to that level. And he said, if you keep on doing this, or any side keeps on doing this, I will move up that trial date. And we spoke about it before with Brian McMonigal. The judge can do this. So it'll be very interesting to see if he does interviews, if he does podcasts. Will he release any more information going forward? And I will tell you one more thing. You mentioned the website that was launched over the weekend. We actually have a sidebar coming out later today. We went through the amended complaint. We went through that new timeline that was drafted by Justin Baldoni's side. Picked out some of the key points. The new Ryan Reynolds text messages, a very interesting still image that has been put forward. How does this change the context of this whole case? That's coming out later today. Elizabeth, thank you so much for your reporting. I know it's cold outside. We're going to get you out of there. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much for being our eyes and ears in that courtroom.
All right. Thanks, Jesse.
All right, everybody. So thank you so much for joining us on our special coverage of the Justin Baldoni, Blake Lively first court hearing. We will make sure to continue to do these as the case progresses, especially since there are no cameras in that courtroom. We will do our best to report live about what is happening. And again, continue all of our coverage on this case. It's one of the biggest ones that we're covering. I want to thank all of you for submitting your questions on YouTube. We appreciate all of you. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll catch you next time.